Hello and welcome to another episode of The Code of Career with me, Cameron Blackwood. Today's guest is Simon Barker. Simon is the founder of All the Code, which is a careers network. And if you think that sounds familiar, you'd be correct. Both myself and Simon are super keen on helping people break into the industry and level up within it. So you should definitely check out his podcast, All the Code, and all of his content, particularly on Instagram. Chances are, if you're a fan of TCC, you'll be a fan of All the Code as well. Whilst we mainly talk about tech careers today, there's also as well some deviations into stuff like SQL, Web3 technologies, and JavaScript. If you enjoyed this episode or any Code of Career content, then please do feel free to contribute to the Patreon. There's a lot of great benefits in there that you can use to advance your career and get more behind the scenes access to what we're working on here. For free, if you want to support the show, please just join our Discord and just get engaged on there. It's a great way for us to create an engaged audience and encourage more brands to get involved with the Code of Career, and it's a real win-win. You can find the invite to that in the description. But without further ado, it's time to grab a coffee, push those commits, and enjoy the show. Hi Simon, thanks so much for joining me. How you doing?
Yeah, Cameron, I'm really good, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on somebody else's podcast for a change.
Yeah, well, it's very exciting to speak with a fellow podcaster as well. Obviously, I'm a big fan, and I think I reached out to you because I stumbled across All the Code podcast. I didn't realize actually you have a bit of a whole network going on there. So for those who aren't familiar with you or All the Code or anything like that, do you want to give a rundown about who you are, what your story is, and what you work on?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Simon Barker from All the Code, which is ostensibly an Instagram account that I started 18 months ago to help new developers, career switchers, and what have you get into this weird and wonderful world of tech and development, focusing on how to learn to code, how to get a coding job. Like, that's my core thing, like yourself, is how do you bridge that gap from, okay, you know how to code, but you haven't yet got a developer job? Like, what does that gap look like? And that's the area that I primarily operate in. But the Instagram account does cover more than that. And I'm up to about 55,000 followers there now. I've also got careerswitchtocoding.com, which has a book and a blog. I do some writing for a couple of other websites as well. And then, of course, the All the Code podcast, which I'm really excited to kind of have you on as well, where we'll dive into your story. So, yeah, that's me, Simon from All the Code.
Very exciting. And yeah, I can't wait to be on your podcast because believe it or not, I think you are the 34th guest, I want to say, on the Code of Career. I have never appeared on anyone else's podcast. And actually, due to a technical glitch, we're recording on your software. So it's really weird. It's almost like a preview of being a guest on All the Code. And Zencastr, sort it out. Sort it out, Zencastr.
Yeah, Riverside is sweeping up the market at the moment for this kind of software, I tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. We should make a podcast about podcasting. That'd be very meta.
Oh, let's do.
Cool, good stuff. So obviously on the Code of Career, what I like to do to get the audience to learn a bit more about you in a fun fashion, I like to go through some quick fire questions, and I send those over to you in advance, and no excuses if you're not sure, so they can find out a bit more about you. The first one is a famous Code of Career question. What was your first ever computer?
My first computer, thinking back, was... Well, hang on, does it have to be mine, or is it the first computer that I had like a lot of access to?
It's a super open question, so it can be the first computer you had access to, so your parents, a school computer, or even a games console.
Okay, so I'll answer this twice. The first computer that I had was a Pentium 1 355 megahertz back in Lord knows when, 25 years ago probably. So yeah, and then the first computer that I bought for myself was a Mac Mini Intel Core Duo, and I've been on Mac ever since then. So that was the first one that I bought with my own money, and I replaced it after 6 months with a laptop because that's what I should have done anyway.
Yeah, historically, my philosophy has always been if I'm paying for it, I go Windows or Linux, or if someone else is paying for it, I go Mac. However, I've leveled up in the world a little bit, and I've decided to just go full Mac in my personal life as well. Although I do have a desktop tower that basically I just mess about with. But yeah, I do just love the Apple ecosystem. Like, there's a reason why it's so renowned, and I don't even care if it's a little bit overpriced. Like, the M1 chips are such a game changer.
The thing is, though, the funny thing is, if you spec it up actual like for like, same quality screen, same quality parts, same quality chassis, actually isn't overpriced. The difference is Apple don't offer anything that isn't the best type of screen, the best kind of chassis, right? You don't have an option below that like you do with other brands. Other brands will give you a less well-refined machine, not quite good a screen and that kind of thing. And that's where Apple don't offer that. And that is probably long-term to their detriment to not get the greater market share that they possibly deserve. But that's why it looks like it's all premium, because it is premium stuff, basically.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, if you're a professional developer and you can afford it, it's just a good idea to get as best of a computer as you can, because really you're going to be spending the majority of your day on it, whether that's actually in a day job or doing stuff like what we're doing now, which is out of hours. And, I probably spend 3/4 of my waking hours on a computer. So I'm going to pay for a good one.
Exactly.
And in terms of like actual physical locations of tech, obviously the world's gone a bit remote recently. I know you've become a bit of a digital nomad yourself in recent times, which I'm sure we'll go on to. What's your favourite tech city of all time?
My favourite tech city of all time, it will be an unexpected answer for many people, but it's Newcastle upon Tyne in the UK. So
it's an underrated tech city, Newcastle. It's good.
So exactly, it's got a good tech scene. I was part of it sort of for a while when I ran my business there for 8 years. A lot of the most famous games in the world have actually come out of Newcastle's quasi-underground gaming industry that you don't even realise is necessarily there, and also kind of shared with Edinburgh as well. So yeah, it's Newcastle upon Tyne. I was there for 14 years. It's awesome. It's cold, but it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an Edinburgh resident myself, so cold but awesome is a familiar adjective for me. And that games industry, I don't know what it is in the water in the North Sea, because Newcastle, Edinburgh, and Dundee. There's such a history for it. My parents live near Dundee, and I was actually talking about this with them the other day, because they've opened up a big new museum in Dundee, and they were saying that there's literally a whole section dedicated to Dundee's history in the video gaming industry, because all sorts of games have come out of there. I mean, what
Grand Theft
games?
Auto is the biggest one that I can think of. Rockstar Games, and also is quite a lot of Forza made in that area.
I don't know if it's Forza, but I think Codemasters are based in Edinburgh. Or they might be somewhere in Fife, like Kirkcaldy or somewhere.
Funnily enough, where I now live and move to, I moved to Leamington Spa, which nickname is Silicon Spa. And again, we have a lot of games companies there. We have Ubisoft, we have Quali, which is a big mobile games company. There's a few around that area as well. So I've never made a game. I've never been a game developer, but I seem to live in places where there are game developers.
Yeah, and did you say you're in Leamington Spa at the moment? So I remember you saying something about Lisbon.
Yeah, so I'm actually right this very second. I'm actually in Albufeira in Portugal. We are practicing for if we would like to emigrate. We've been here now for 4.5 weeks. We have a week and a half left of our trip. And we will be driving back to the UK in 2 weeks' time, or a week and a half time. So I'm not looking forward to that drive. But the one thing I have learned is that we do very much like Portugal, and we would potentially very much like to live here long term. So yeah, and of course, bigger developer. And the new remote world gives people that choice and that power. There are some tax and legal ramifications, but even those are becoming very solvable with companies like Remote OK acting as Remote.com acting as an EOR and that kind of thing. So it is definitely becoming much more of a possibility.
That sounds really, really exciting, and all the best for that move. And I think it would behoove everyone to try and live abroad at some point in their life and work abroad, because it's really just an experience unlike any other. I've had a lot of people message me recently, actually, saying that they want to potentially try and move abroad. Usually the US, I can think of one reason why they might want to move to the US.
Is that because they pay the developers $150,000 a year, maybe?
I think it's like purely from the goodness of their heart. They just have a deep love for American culture and history. Nothing to do with the fact that you can make $150K as a junior out there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but anyways,
these were supposed to be the quick fire questions.
Yeah, these are supposed to be the quick fire questions. And when you are coding, what type of music do you like to listen to?
I always don't want to answer this, but whatever. I listen to country music.
Oh, nice.
That's the main thing I listen to, because I love guitars. my taste in music was summed up by my old business partner once as "you like guitars," and basically the only genre that is still playing guitars writ large is country. Like rock is, as Fender and Gibson are both having massive problems in the last kind of decade of declining guitar sales. Country is like the one sector that is still keeping it going. And yeah, I've got to skip past some of it, but yeah, country music, that's what I listen to.
Very nice. One of the three sort of British country fans, but
Basically, yeah, there's dozens of us. I say dozens.
and what about when you like to do your work? Would you say you're an early bird or a night owl?
Yeah, unfortunately, I am both. So I can get going from first thing in the morning, and that comes from running a factory for nearly 10 years. My staff used to like to start at 7:30 in the morning, which meant that I started at 7 in the morning. But also, I have problems getting to sleep, so I'm quite comfortable working until midnight. So yeah, kind of the one time a day I'm not very good is like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Like around that time, I'm pretty bad. But that's because I've been up since 6 and I work until 12.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I respect anyone that can be, up and working at 7:30. I find it difficult to really get into gear before 10 myself. And what about before the days of being an entrepreneur, before the days of being a coder? What job did you want when you were a kid?
Scientist. I don't know what that meant, but I wanted to be a scientist.
Kind of like a Doc Brown and Back to the Future kind of figure.
Yeah, maybe. I just always imagined like playing around with green test tubes and stuff. Turns out I was terrible at chemistry, terrible at biology, but I was pretty good at physics and electronics, which is why I ended up doing a PhD in in electrical engineering. So yeah, scientist is what I wanted to be. Landed up being a quasi tech engineer, entrepreneur type thing.
Interesting. And let's talk about that journey. So you went from aspiring scientist, PhD candidate, to entrepreneur, to developer, to now kind of developer and marketeer / CEO / all the rest of it. Tell me about it. How did it all happen?
Yeah, so I went to a military boarding school, and from there I realised that I didn't want the structure of the military, but I enjoyed the technical aspects that college promoted. It was for technical army officers. And so from there, I went to university, did electrical engineering, did a bachelor's, went straight to PhD. My bachelor's, well, I graduated in 2008, which was probably the worst year to graduate ever, apart from maybe this year. Friends were getting job offers revoked left, right, and centre. The world was imploding. Lehman Brothers was closing. Fannie Mae and Mac were going under, or what have you. My supervisor said, "Hey, do you want to do a PhD? It's fully paid." I was like, "Yes, please, I'll do that." And my wife also got an offer to do a PhD. Hers was neuroscience and electrical engineering. So I thought, right, let's stay here in Newcastle, do a PhD, hunker down, wait out the recession, get some money, and then I'll go and get a proper job after that. My wife's PhD took a year longer than mine. She had to do a master's for hers. I didn't. So in that intervening year, when I'd finished and she was still working on her PhD, I got interested in startups. Like the social network had kind of come out. Tech was cool. Coding was cool. I taught myself to code on my PhD. My wife and I had started a little business on the side making iPad cases. I think if we'd kept that business going, life would have been very different, but we were too early. Yeah, sometimes a product is too early for its market, and the iPad came out, and 3 months later, we were making custom cases with a JavaScript web store where you could go on and like customize the case you wanted yourself, and we were just a bit kind of early to that, but I'd kind of started to get the feel for it. So yeah, taught myself to code, to solve problems on my PhD, to write software for that, and also to run this business on the side. Ran the business then. Once my PhD finished, my wife and I kind of shut that business, and then I started another business with my now friend. We set up a factory and made a hardware product, kind of making UK central heating systems more efficient. That business was supposed to fail after 6 months, and then my wife would finish her PhD and we'd go and get real jobs. And that business actually lasted 8 years. We'd ended up wrapping that up in 2019. February was very warm. We were selling a very seasonal winter-based product, and unfortunately we couldn't trade through Feb 2019. So then I was sat in this place of like, I'd never had a real job. I had a diverse range of skills, from running a factory, creating products, coding, etc. And I landed up putting out 200 job applications in the summer of 2019 and getting 2 interviews off the back of that Fortunately, one of them, right at the end, I decided to start applying for coding jobs, and so I think 7 coding job applications in, I got a I got an interview and landed up landing a junior developer position with a UK retailer working in their warehouse software department. Quickly got promoted to software developer 2 from junior because, as they pointed out, I'd already been writing software for over a decade. And I kept getting questions from people. They were like, aren't you a junior? I'm like, yeah, but you just need to change your .htaccess file to do this. And there'd be something else. And I'm like, make that a private method so you do this, this, and this. They're like, aren't you a junior? I'm like, yeah, but not really. Let's just move on and solve this problem that we've got in front of us. So unfortunately, COVID took a real toll on that business. So I moved to a data science consultancy. Was there for just under a year, working on a new platform that kind of would have been a competitor to Snowflake, if anyone's heard of that business. But that project landed up getting killed, so I moved on to an edutech startup, which was really great fun, fast-growing team. I got to have a hand in helping define some of the culture there, but I decided to start the Instagram account around the time I joined the data science consultancy, just to get my foot back in the idea of marketing and sort of doing something marketing first and not just being that kind of classic tech guy that writes code and nobody cares or wants it. So I was like, let's find an audience, let's solve problems for that audience, and we'll work out what to do there. And the audience that I love is developers. I love, like you obviously do as well, I love helping developers, love working with developers, love talking about development. So yeah, as of 2 weeks ago, I'm full time on All the Code, working out what that business model is going to be, helping people, talking about tech, living in this kind of quasi careers DevRel kind of area. So yeah, that's my story. But the thread is basically coding throughout all of that and tech. And I've somehow managed to accumulate 15 years of developer experience at this point across, I can't even count the number of programming language and tech stacks that I've worked with by this point. I'm old.
So, sounds cool. And I mean, what's a day in the life like for you now? Because I actually wrote my notes. What's a day in the life like for a technical entrepreneur? But it's not even just that you're technical; you're handling commercial side as well. So you're very busy. Simply put, what's a typical day in the life like for you working on All the Code?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I have been essentially doing a full-time job and All the Code for 12 to 18 months. And now that I've come full-time, I'm still trying to work out what that looks like, because part of the deal with my wife was that, yeah, she can cover the bills and maintain our kind of lifestyle while I work out what this is going to be. But she would very much like to see her husband again in the evenings and weekends, which hasn't been a thing for about 12 months. And so where I kind of expected to have this big catapulting release of productivity and content and make great strides in the first couple of weeks, in actual fact, I've probably created just about as much content as I would have done when I was doing this on the side, but I've been doing it during typical business hours. So, a lot of this is trying to understand what content people want, what messages they need to hear to help them get into development, to get that first job, and working out how I can commercially best solve their problems, but that also kind of brings me an income of some kind. And so at the moment, it's a mix of lots and lots of content creation for blogging, making many Instagram posts and growing that as a kind of foundation. I use Instagram as my test bed for content to see what resonates with people, to see what concerns and queries they have, and how I can then use that to inform the other content I make, which is longer form and takes more time, like the blogging, like the newsletter, like the people that I interview on All the Code, like the things that I tweet about, although I don't tweet as much as I should. That's really what it is right now, is kind of understanding and defining how I can best serve a market that clearly is crying out for this kind of service in it, where we are helping people get jobs, understand how to get jobs, how to show that they are valuable to an employer as a developer with a previous career, but then also saying to companies, hey, look, there's a whole sector of the market here that is highly motivated, dedicated, and ready to work, and you are ignoring them because you only want to hire people with 7 years experience on a framework that's been around for 4 years. Like, you are complaining about the hiring difficulties and the talent shortage, and yet you are basically ignoring a whole sector of the market that is ready and willing to work. So that's what I want to help solve. But yeah, basically I'm making it up as I go along.
As is everyone.
Day to day. Yeah, exactly.
That's the ultimate part about when you realise you've become an adult, is the point when you realise that actually everyone's winging it and that no one's got a plan. And it's strangely comforting in a weird way.
Yeah, it's also, I think the day that you realise that is when your parents start coming to you for advice that you feel like you should be going to them for. I've started to get that now, and I'm like, okay, we're doing that. Yeah, sure. So yeah, this is how that finance thing works, and that's how that bit of legislation works, and maybe you should consider doing this. And I'm like, you're the parents here. Like, okay, this is how it works. So yeah,
I can't say I've reached that stage yet. I'm still basically just the IT and tech support of the house, but other than that.
Yeah, your role will expand. Don't worry.
Cool. And you've kind of gone your own way in a good way. You've gone your own way in your career and like made your own job and like made your own opportunities. As part of that, you've had to learn a lot of new skills. No doubt, like informally, not within an education. We mentioned CS50 earlier. How have you been able to effectively upskill through your career? Because you've gone through so many different job types and entrepreneurial journeys. How have you been able to do that?
Yeah, so I think one of the massive benefits of going to university is you do learn how to learn, and you learn how to learn for yourself. And so that is the primary tool that university gives you, as far as I'm concerned. And obviously I took it even further by doing the PhD. So CS50 was actually, I had a website in the second year of university where I literally just did CSS and HTML, and I think I just used W3 Schools for that. I think I'd had 2 failed attempts at learning C, once when I was 14 and landed up literally bricking the family computer. And then, yeah.
Which is delete System 32?
When that was possible. But basically, there was no computer left on the computer. We had to get someone out to fix it. So yeah, everything was gone.
One of my previous guests, Romeo, deleted System 32 on his family computer twice growing up.
Yeah. Do you know what? That could well be what I did. Yeah, looking back. So yeah, and then finally CS50 is what stuck for me. But I had to have a reason to learn. So the reason to learn was I was doing a PhD where I had to program a microcontroller to send some data wirelessly as part of that. And I realized that, yeah, I could kind of cobble it together, but this was, I think Stack Overflow launched in 2008. So we're talking around the time that Stack Overflow was only just really becoming a thing. So I do actually kind of remember a time before Stack Overflow.
I can't imagine such a thing.
Times. So, yeah. I know, but it happened. Can you believe we used to learn coding from books, actual books? So CS50, and then kind of cobbling together for a while, picking things up as I went, asking questions on Stack Overflow, because I didn't know any other software developers until I actually got my first software developer job in 2019. So I'd been coding on my own for basically a decade or so. And then I found Udemy. And I think I might be one of the few people that have actually finished a course on Udemy, like literally taken a course to like 100%. So Rob Thomas, I want to say Rob Thomas, that might be the Maroon 5 singer, but I think it's also the name of a very successful lecturer, teacher, whatever on Udemy. So I love the iPhone. There's just something magical about an iOS app to me. And even now, when I make a little app and I run it on my phone, it just lands a bit differently in my soul when I see it like on the screen. I'm like, haha, you're running on that phone. You're not like I'm not accessing a website or whatever. Like, this is actually an app on the phone. And so I really needed to solve Radfan, my old business's supply chain issues. And so I'd written a Python script to do that as part of deciding to learn Python. I think I I followed through Learn Python the hard way was how I learnt Python. Also learnt that I hate Python. I know many people love Python. I absolutely despise Python. I've ended job processes when they've said, "Oh, we code in Python." I'm like, "I'm really sorry, I'm not for you." But I wrote this little supply chain script, and I realized that what I actually needed was an app on my phone. So when I was walking around the factory, I could actually sort of take notes and update stock levels on my phone. So I took the Learning Swift course, and I created a stock management app that is still available. It's version 1.0. I never did a point release. It's still available on the App Store, and it still sells 2 or 3 copies a week at like $2 a shot, which still astounds me because it came out in 2016 and I haven't touched it since. So that was how I learned with Udemy, and I really like video courses. I've taken half a dozen of Maximilian Schwartz Botzit's courses. I've taken Simon Grimm's Ionic courses. I've taken a few other Udemy courses. I watch them on 2x speed and code along if I need to, and then usually I just have a project that I'm working on the side, and whatever example they're doing, I'll just find the next nearest thing that I can implement in the app that I'm working on. So yeah, that's my kind of learning style, is quickly watching videos and then implementing my own version of it as soon as possible, so that I don't get stuck in tutorial hell.
As so many do. And for people that aren't familiar with tutorial hell, do you want to explain what that is? Because it is a huge trap people that learn to code fall into.
Yeah, so tutorial hell is when you are so used to having your coding guided by somebody else that you actually don't build up the problem solving pathways in your brain to actually know how to implement code from first principles. So you know that when someone tells you, oh, to do what we're doing here, you need to do a map so that you convert this array to that. So in the moment, you understand what's going on. What you haven't been taught is why they're using map in that moment, so that you understand and connect problem to solution without just being told how it works. And this leaves you in a situation where you actually go completely blank when you try to create something yourself, because you haven't built up that neural pathway to link theory to application and work out how to do that yourself. So this is why when they say in a course, pause it here and solve this problem yourself, you really should pause it there and solve that problem yourself, even if it takes you 3 hours and dozens of Google searches and what have you, because that's how you actually learn to code, rather than learning how to copy someone coding.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing as well, it can lead to over-reliance on like learning tools. So to give an example of how I was stuck in tutorial hell, I spent 6 months coding before I even knew what an IDE was, let alone actually used one. And as a consequence of that, I was so used to coding inside a tiny box, which was FreeCodeCamp for me, which is fantastic. FreeCodeCamp's amazing. But as a consequence of that, I didn't know how to build a wider scale project. I'd never used VS Code or Atom or whatever. And Git was a complete mystery to me. I thought GitHub was somewhere where you literally just copied and pasted your code in, which is really silly for me to say and even think that now. But, it's something that can easily happen, especially if you're self-taught. So it's a quick way to get pigeonholed. So, yeah, it's definitely a good thing to avoid.
So I have to remind myself, just touching on what you said there about kind of not knowing what Git was and stuff, is when right in the early days, and this was definitely before Stack Overflow, I was trying to build a website where I would just put information up about what I was studying, kind of an early days kind of blog, right? And I remember spending 2 days trying to work out the difference between a website and a blog. 2 days to work out the difference between those two things. It took me so long to realize that a website is anything and a blog is a type of website, and specifically it tends to be a piece of software running on a server that creates a blog. There was nowhere to just lay out and explain that in clear terms back in 2006 when I was doing this. And so, yeah, whenever I meet someone who says, oh, I haven't used this, I haven't done that, I've been going through this process, I always remind myself, I didn't know the difference between a website and a blog, and that took me 2 days to work out. Like, there is no concept too simple for it to be considered just, oh, you should get this regardless, right? Because a blog versus a website, it took me 2 days.
Yeah, it's something where there's all kinds of situations where I think every developer has felt really silly about something when they're learning. I still do all the time, and it's totally natural. And you're always it feeds into imposter syndrome, which is a horrible cycle. But yeah, I can really relate to what you're saying now, and it's important that we keep that in mind as well, as we help people that are more junior. And I mean, we're talking about growth and development. In terms of the industry itself, what do you see as the future of web dev? On recent episodes, people have shouted stuff out like WebAssembly, Web 3.0, and the blockchain. What do you see as like an emerging tech or trends that you think will happen over the next 10 years?
Yeah, so I think the move to cloud is happening. Whether you like it or not, the next 10 years is all about transitioning as much infrastructure as possible to public clouds. So be it AWS, GCP, Azure, and then the extension of that will be the edge. So that will be things like Vercel, Netlify, Cloudflare. They host static content at the quickest response time part of infrastructure on the internet. It's highly available, massively scaled, so cheap to host these websites. These platforms don't even charge you until you're getting billions and billions of hits because it's basically just static content. That being said, I think the following 20 years will be undoing quite a bit of that. I think there's a lot of money to be made right now moving everything to public cloud, and I think in the future there'll be a lot of money to be made undoing some of that move to public cloud. And that is hugely controversial, and most people will disagree with me, and that's totally fine, and I am happy to be wrong. But you do a search online for AWS is rubbish, and you will find a large cohort of developers who are not happy with the current move to proprietary third-party black box systems. They come with a huge amount of power and a huge amount of scale, but there are downsides that right now I don't think enough people are talking about. So that's the transition I see. Web3, maybe. I don't know. I just don't know if the world needs an expensive, distributed slow compute, which is currently what Web3 is. Like, it's expensive, it's hyped, it's full of scams, it's the financialization of everything. And also, there's a very, very strong reason to not have everything completely immutable. Like, if it's on the blockchain, it's immutable. It's not going anywhere. Unless you literally destroy that complete blockchain, it's not going anywhere.
But what about if there's a consensus and it can be changed though, right? Like if there's a 51% consensus, a record can be changed, if I understand correctly.
But the 51% consensus would have to agree to fork the blockchain from the block before that.
Mm-hmm.
But any node that disagrees, or any node that someone spins up and says, actually, no, do you know what? You guys can go off. I mean, Ethereum has been forked, right?
Yeah, because Ethereum had that huge fork, didn't it?
Blockchains. Yeah, because they got hacked and $270 million worth of coin got rinsed out. It's interesting. The reason why they forked it is because Ethereum had massive investors that said you need to fork it before this, otherwise we're walking away. And so every time Web3 has had the opportunity to go decentralized or money, it has taken money. And we're seeing that time and time and time again is they're going down the money path. Now, it's human nature, because the other issue I have with Web3 is that the old incentives for founders was have an idea, build something, raise some money, do a really good job, get an exit, get rich. And that could be a 10 or 15 timeline, right? Whereas now, come up with an idea, fork an existing blockchain technology, start your new chain, do an initial coin offering, call it a DAO, pump up the price. You now have billions of dollars in your bank account if you want to sell your coin, which has happened. And they just walk off into the sunset.
But do you remember what happened with
they got the rewards straight away?
Squid Game coin, obviously. That was probably when we hit peak bull market. Without turning this into a crypto podcast, that was when we hit peak bull market, when so many people fell for that. and it got rug pulled. Like, it
100%.
was a ridiculous situation.
Yeah.
That's what worries me. And I mean, I'm someone that's been, I bought my first Bitcoin when I was 17 in 2013 and 2012 actually, and I've been a believer in cryptocurrencies and decentralized finance for a long time, and I think it is. The opportunities to circumnavigate, oppressive regimes and that sort of thing via these systems is amazing. But yeah, I agree with a lot of the points you've raised about how it's becoming a bit of a scammer's paradise, and a lot of people are just in it for the money. So it's a difficult one. I'm really interested in what you said about moving back to on-prem. I wonder where that will go. I do have some worries about how we will eventually, if things continue the way they go, all cloud computing power will be in the hands of about 4 companies. That's slightly worrying.
Yeah.
Because
100%.
even on just the simplest terms, oligopolies can often operate as cartels, and I can see that ending up becoming very expensive. I'm not saying it will happen, but it does. It's right to be a bit concerned about it.
100%. John Siracusa from ATP, Accidental Dev podcast, he was discussing aspects of this when they were talking about Linode getting bought, which was one of the small minnows in the public cloud space. And he said that AWS is cheaper, but it's like a cloud infrastructure RPG game. You need to work out how to structure things to make it cheaper. And weirdly, AWS do help you extensively make it cheaper. However, eventually it gets very, very expensive. And when I say an unraveling of the cloud, I don't necessarily mean going back to on-prem. I just mean a going back to more traditional server style infrastructure. So it may still be on AWS. It might just not be using Lambda functions, using the fire that is DynamoDB. It might be using, actual VMs, Kubernetes, that kind of thing. I had this chat with Lou Bichard from Open Up the Cloud, where we talked about this on All the Code, which is there is a wide spectrum of what the cloud is. I mean, at a certain point, the cloud is just hosting, right? And then it's just different flavors on top of that. And a lot of, I think, what we're seeing at the moment is a big move to highly scalable, decentralized, event-driven architecture. But the developer experience on those platforms is horrendous. Digging through asynchronous event logs in Cloudflare is literally the worst way to spend a Thursday afternoon when you're trying to work out what the issue is in production and you've got customers screaming at you. So either companies need to significantly sort out the cost and developer experience aspect, or we will see an unraveling back towards not proprietary. That is my fundamental issue with the cloud, is like you said there, it's 4 companies that at a certain point will be able to do whatever they want. And if we link the 2 things of the future we're talking about here, just how decentralized is your blockchain if 75% of the nodes are running on AWS?
It's very true. That's a nice headline, and that's something that I can definitely cut out and use as an audiogram. So that's a seasoned podcaster right there. Although I think if I go for the AWS sponsorship,
afterwards.
Yeah, if I go for the AWS sponsorship, maybe not. I'm not going to lie. Like AWS, if you're listening, I'll 100% sell out for a sponsorship there. Like, you can disregard everything I just said.
Me too.
I do like AWS, to be fair. I am a fan of it, and I definitely see its use, and like I'm using it with Code a Career. So I definitely I just worry about the in 20 years time. But yeah, it'll be an interesting thing to watch unravel for sure.
The nice thing is that we don't know what the future holds, and one of my core beliefs is strong opinions loosely held. The best thing you can be as a senior developer is opinionated. You're not getting paid to just write code. You're getting paid to have an opinion, to have a direction, and to have a core set of beliefs. But unlike what the world would have you believe, when new information comes along that is better, you can change your mind. So, I might say right now, I am not a fan of certain aspects of event-driven architecture in AWS. But you know what? If I'm working for a company that says, yeah, but we need to do this, that, and the other, and AWS is the best fit, then yeah, fine. We'll use AWS. Not a problem at all, because that is what professionals and engineers should do. They should assess things based on what's in front of them, and not just hold on to dogmatic beliefs.
Yeah, and in general, it's a big part about being an adult, which I think the world seems to forget a lot, especially online, is it's okay to change your opinion. If you want to change your opinion, that's fine. Like, whether you're confronting new evidence or whether you've just thought about the problem a lot, it's a good idea to expose yourself to different ideas, and to change your opinion over time is, if anything, a sign of strength. I think, whether that's about politics, tech, I was going to say sport, but it's a bit weird if you change your favourite sports team based on like your evolving mindset. I just couldn't think of a good third example. But yeah, it's, you might, I don't know. To give an example, I used to hate rap music when I was like 14. Now it's one of my favourite genres. That's a very surface level example.
That's
but
okay.
It's part of being an adult is, just changing your opinion and stuff, and accepting that it can evolve, and that, you're not totally infallible. And
100%. There's two little expressions I like. No is a complete sentence, and yes, I may change my mind on things.
And one to add to that as well is, I believe Abraham Lincoln said, if you've only got the money for one newspaper, buy the one you disagree with.
Yeah, fair enough. I like that.
Yeah. So what advice do you think you would give to someone who has maybe listened to this podcast or your podcast and read materials and decided, I think I do want to learn to code? What advice would you give them, both from a technical standpoint and a professional and personal one?
Sure. So I always divide this question into two different cohorts. The first is, if you are not in a great rush to learn to code, i.e. you have time, you're not on the breadline, you don't have an impending sort of redundancy or cliff, then start with something that teaches the foundations. CS50 is probably the best course that I know, and it's free, that will teach you fundamentals. It takes slower. It is classic bottom-up learning. You learn a lot. You might not necessarily realize how it's relevant, but it's an excellent foundation. Start the course that gives you foundations and see it through. That's the core part, is to see it through. Don't get distracted halfway through by something different. Learn to code. That's the most important thing, because once you've learned to code, what language you use doesn't really matter, unless it's Python. Then really evaluate your life choices. But I'm joking, of course. But learning to code is the most important activity, because I've programmed in like 12 different languages over the years. All of them are slightly different. I have to Google syntax in most of them, but the fundamentals, arrays, tuples, variables, consts, are all the same. If you have an impending cliff in your life, you absolutely desperately need a job, you absolutely desperately need to prepare for a redundancy that you know is coming or something, then take a very practical, hands-on web development course. Something like Zero to Mastery or a Udemy course, something like that, that teaches you very, very practical, vocational web developer skills in a set amount of time, and absolutely cover everything that course gives you. Make sure that you don't get stuck in tutorial, that you do the challenges, because that will give you a top-down, quick injection of skills that you can then use as a sort of bulkhead into the development world in your first job. You will have lots of gaps in your knowledge that you will need to actively go back and fill in. I would recommend a book called The Imposter's Handbook, which is brilliant for that. But that is the quickest way, but you will need to do a lot of work after the fact. So there are my two answers to that question.
Yeah, that's really good, and I hope you don't mind me plugging an affiliate link here. But I mean, we're both actually both brand ambassadors to Zero to Mastery. So if you like the sound of it, then you can check the link in this one, or you can check the link in Simon's podcast as well, and you can go through there. And CS50, obviously, being that it's free, there's no affiliate program, but I think that must be the 20th time CS50's been mentioned on there, and something doesn't get mentioned that often if it's not incredible. And David Mallon is just an amazing guy, and I would love to get him on here actually at some point, if he'd accept the opportunity. And just his style of teaching is unbelievable, and the way he can explain very complex topics very simply is unlike anything else. And how good is it? And how lucky are we can get a Harvard education for free 5,000 miles away. It boggles the mind. Imagine explaining that to someone 20 years ago.
And it's been that way for nearly 15 years, because I took CS50 when it was a few files that you would FTP off Harvard servers and some lectures on iTunes U back in 2008, 9.
I didn't realise it'd been going that long.
I had to... Yeah, so I had they back then. I think they still teach C now, and back then the only way to get the util files, the CS50.h and .c files, was to download them as raw files from Harvard's FTP server, and then I had to work out how to get the compiler to link and make those files so that I could use them in even the first problem set. So like the first thing I did for CS50 wasn't even solve the problem set. It was work out how to get GCC, which is the compiler from memory, to link in other external files so that they're in scope when you need it to run. I think that took like 3 days, and I don't think it was on Stack Overflow, so I have no idea how I solved it, but I did.
It's often the way. If you could sum up my career, that's probably that tagline. I don't know how I solved it, but I did.
Yeah. But I did, yeah. But just the amount of lives that David Malan must have changed as well. Like, good Lord, what an impact one person can have on a sector. Like, it's just unbelievable. And I think we'd all be so lucky to have our names known that widely for having a positive impact on.
And he's never sold out as well after like nearly 20 years doing it. Like,
he's got tenure though, isn't he? He's got tenure at Harvard. I think he's doing all right.
Yeah, he's probably doing okay. Yeah, I doubt he's struggling. But yeah, everyone has got to check out CS50. It's totally free. Don't be intimidated by the fact it's Harvard. Like, it's challenging, but he explains everything so well, and the infrastructure around it is so good, and it has slightly advanced from the days where you're downloading util files. It's all live streamed, and it's all on GitHub, so I wouldn't worry about the util stuff. People that learnt to code, sort of my era of learning to code, we are very lucky, and we should remember that, because I cannot imagine learning with no Stack Overflow.
It was different back in my day.
Yeah. Walking uphill to school both ways.
With coal in my bag.
Yeah. But this has been an awesome episode. I mean, this is kind of part one, really, because I'll be popping on your podcast very shortly. And I'd really like to thank you for coming on, Simon. It's been awesome speaking to you. And do you want to give a bit of more of a shout out to All the Code? Because I really highly recommend anyone who likes to code a career is going to love All the Code.
Yes, thank you. This has been great fun. Being a guest is a different experience, and I've really enjoyed it. I mean, you don't become a podcaster if you don't like the sound of your own voice. So to have an opportunity to hear my own voice even more has just been wonderful. So thank you. So the best place to find me is instagram.com/allthecode. DMs are open, as they say on Twitter. Just DM me more than hi. Please send me more than just hi. I get so many messages of just hi. I'm like, no, go on, you've got my attention. Like, ask the question now. Like, don't sort of leave me hanging. So so careerswitchtocoding.com is the web address. Join the mailing list if you want a quick start guide, 15-page, digest it in about 5 minutes, and it just kind of covers off some of the kind of standard points in this area, and no doubt the kind of thing that Cameron has covered off in previous episodes. But yeah, that is me, and I really appreciate you having me on, Cameron. This has been awesome.
No worries at all. Well, I'm looking forward to speaking again very, very shortly. Going on All the Code, and obviously you can find that on all stream platforms. All the links to that will all be in the description, of course, to this show as well. But for now as well, I'd just like to say thank you to all the listeners. We've had a huge push on the Code a Career Discord recently. So if you want to join there for a bit of peer support, find a mentor, maybe even mentor somebody if you're a very kind human, you can do that as well. The invite for that is in the description. As well. But until I speak to you next time, I hope you have a great week and happy coding.